So we are here with Glenn Shaw and from the great state of Ohio, and we are going to get started with the clutch. Time to adjust the clutch. I forget what the name of it was, but what he's going to do is kind of review clutches and kind of go over how different styles work, and eventually get down to where we're going to adjust this clutch. But he's worked on quite a bit of tractors at Eaterville and Carthage, and help manages that. So he's got quite a bit of experience in mechanicking on the fly. So,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. So the first thing we're going to do is just talk a little bit about clutches. There's several different styles of clutches that we have out there. There's a single disc, a multi-disc, an internal expanding shoe, an external contracting shoe, a band, and a cone clutch. Clutches, what's their primary function? Anybody?
Connect the engine with the transmission.
Or?
Disconnect the engine.
Disconnect the engine with the transmission. So what he said is either connect the engine to the transmission or disconnect the engine to the transmission. And they can actually fail at either one of those tasks. They can fail to connect or they can fail to disconnect. And we're going to talk a little bit about that also. So let's go over here and start with the Titan. The Titan has two clutches on it. One for the belt pulley on this side, which is an external contracting. So when you push this pulley in, you squeeze those discs on, or the clutch pads onto the flywheel, and it engages the pulley. On the other side of the tractor is the ground drive clutch. That's the one that's used to move the tractor. It is an internal expanding, so when you engage the clutch, you push these shoes out against the pulley to make the tractor go. When we look at the Russell, this is the belt pulley clutch. It's also an internal expanding clutch. And that, again, that's just for the belt pulley. On the other side of the tractor is the ground drive clutch. It's also internal expanding. The belt pulley clutch on this tractor is kind of unique. It's a disc clutch. If you look in there, you can see there's a center disc and there's wooden blocks. And when you engage this belt pulley, you move this lever. It's frozen right now. It won't move. It probably needs a little bit of grease. But there's a tapered cone right here that as you move this cone, you cause these levers to move, and it contracts and pushes these blocks against the disc. The ground drive clutch on this tractor is inside here. It's an internal expanding. On the Rumley, it's a little different. It's an internal expanding clutch, but it's the same clutch for the belt pulley and the ground drive. There's not a separate one. This is the belt pulley clutch on the Minneapolis. It's an external contracting. When you connect this, when you engage the clutch, you're squeezing those pads onto the pulley to cause this to turn with the engine. The ground drive on this tractor is external contracting. If we go over here, we've got the same thing on the Eagle. What's really interesting is when we get over to the Waterloo Boy, and there is a cone clutch. The Mogul also has two different style clutches. It's got a pulley clutch, which is a disc clutch. It's not a internal or external. It's a disc clutch. And then on the ground drive, it's an internal expanding clutch. So now let's come back here to the Nichols. This tractor is known to have problems with one of the functions of clutching. In this case, it's the disengagement. So this tractor tends to not want to disengage. Okay? So when you're troubleshooting What you need to look for are signs of wear, signs that somebody has adjusted it and it's out of adjustment, signs that something is missing or broken. And with this tractor, what we can see, and we're on television now, right? Yep, we're on television. If you look at this tractor and you look at the gears, there's some decent wear on the gears. So you know this tractor's done a fair amount of work. If you move the parts, you see there's play in here. This also has a significant amount of play in it. These pins, Mark, engage and disengage the clutch. See how all those pieces have a lot of movement and slop? Disengage it. I don't know if the television's got it. It might. These pins right here, if you wiggle this there, you can see how that's all worn. So when I said this tractor tends to not want to disengage, if you were out plowing with it and you disengage the clutch, it would stop because you have a heavy load on the clutch. But if you're just out driving it around, that's when it doesn't want to stop. If you look closely down here at the bottom, this is what is called a balanced internal expanding clutch. What that means is there's a counterweight here opposite the pivot point from where the clutch mechanism is. So this is like a teeter-totter. Why is that important? Anybody want to guess? Centrifugal force. This piece is connected to the engine. This is connected to the ground drive, to the wheels. When you engage the clutch, this mechanism starts spinning. When this starts spinning, centrifugal force starts acting on these parts. So the designers of this clutch made this thing balanced. So if you consider it like a teeter-totter, there's equal sized people on both sides of it. So as this thing starts spinning faster and faster, the centrifugal force is not supposed to increase the contact force on the clutch to help it engage or prevent it from engaging, depending on, the way it's balanced. What we've got going on here, there's so much wear in this mechanism that this counterweight is actually rubbing on the flywheel. So when you go to disengage this clutch, all the slop in the mechanism lets those weights move out and they start dragging on the flywheel. We've tried to adjust this and we can't get it we can't find a point where we can get it tight enough where it drives, but loose enough where it disengages because you have all this slop in the mechanism, okay? So what this is an example of a clutch. We're gonna go through an adjustment procedure, but it's an example of a clutch that really needs rebuilt to function properly. And when we drive this tractor, we always are careful. We never get it into a situation where if it won't stop, you're gonna hit something. And if you're moving it in a confined space, never fully engage it, you just slip it. That way it never engages. There's another type of clutch, we don't have an example of it here. It's an internal expanding clutch, but it's not balanced. There's no counterweight. So you might ask, well, how's that going to work? So let me do a demonstration with my hands. This sliding mechanism, if you envision a mechanism like this, that you're pushing like this to engage it, and you have a clutch pad on top and bottom. Well, there's no way to do a counterweight. So when it's designed new, it worked just fine. Push the push the center collar in, spreads out the clutch pads against the flywheel, works just fine. When these pins all get worn, you have a fixed amount of movement you can do with your clutch mechanism. So when you disengage it, the centrifugal force holds the clutch pads out. This is Sawyer Massey's known for this, okay? It holds them out against the flywheel, and again, it's not stuck, it's clutch drag. There's a difference between it being stuck and clutch drag. If you have a good brake, you can hit the brake, it'll stop the tractor. Throw a piece of firewood in front of the wheel, it'll stop the tractor. But if you don't have that, it will tend to keep moving, okay? Questions on any of that before we go into adjustment? I have a question before we start. Do you have to adjust the clutch on your John Deere 4020? We're going to do a clutch adjustment here. Why don't we have to not do that on a John Deere 4020 or any modern style tractor like that? What holds or what creates the force to clamp the clutch disc to the flywheel in a tractor like that with a pressure plate? Springs. Why didn't they do that here? They didn't have the technology that we do with the modern clutches. But the other thing is, what do you not want to do with a modern tractor? Do you want to sit and operate with the clutch depressed for long periods of time? No. Why not? I know all of your fathers yelled at you when you did that. Mine did. Because it wears out the throwout bearing. A tractor like this, if they were going to use it for belt pulley work, and you had a ground drive clutch and a belt pulley clutch, your ground drive clutch has to be disengaged the whole time you're running. Say you're running a sawmill or you're running a threshing machine. So they have to use these over-center style clutches where you can lock it in or take it out, but you don't have a throwout bearing that's spinning the whole time when you're disengaged. Okay, make sense? Why am I making a point about that? Why am I saying that before we go into adjustment? With an over-center clutch, you have a sliding collar and connecting points. I'm trying not to get too filthy here. So you have limited movement. When you go from engaged to disengaged, that adjustment or that distance that you move doesn't change. Let's say it's a ½ an inch, just for an argument's sake. When you have the collar completely disengaged, you're a ½ an inch away from the flywheel. When you fully engage it, you're a ½ an inch closer to the flywheel. You can't change that. So with an over-center clutch, you have to be able to take up for wear in the clutch material over time, so that ½ an inch of travel still allows you to fully engage and fully disengage. Make sense? You've got an Oliver hat on. Oliver PTOs were that way. 88, 1600, whatever. Lock it in, lock it out. Over time, as that clutch wears, what do you have to do? You have to adjust it so that it snaps in, it doesn't slip, but you can still get it disengaged. There's a couple things that are really critical here with the proper way to do this. Number one, these are left and right hand threads in these turnbuckles. So when you turn it, both sides are going out or both sides are going in. What that means is a little bit of adjustment goes a long way. So typically what I always do, and I've seen a lot of people fall victim to this, they over adjust. Because take this for example. Look at all this slop. So they think, oh, it's way out of adjustment. So they take it a full turn, and then it's way too tight. Or it's really tight and they think, oh my gosh, this is way too tight, we have to loosen it a bunch, so they loosen it a bunch. My typical rule of thumb is I take it 1 hex flat at a time and then try it and see how it does. I've already loosened the jam nuts on this to make this quicker. Mark, go ahead and lock it in. So now we've got it locked in. So we're going to see if there's any slop in these. See? So that one's loose. This one is also loose. Before I adjust it, take it out, Mark. I'm going to turn it 180 degrees. We're going to try it again. Lock it in. That one's loose. That one's not. So what does that tell us? It tells us there's a lot of wear in this, and 180 degrees rotation changes the setting of this. So we've got 2 options. What we want to do is we want to get so that we're equal. You always want your 2 shoes, or in the case some of these have 3 shoes on them or 4, you always want them to be engaging together. So we're going to start by loosening the one that's tight. Go ahead and loosen it, Mark. Try it again. Now they're both tight at the same time. Okay, loosen it. Let's rotate it 180 degrees. Try it again. Now they're both tight. What am I not taking into consideration? Anybody? Heat? Is that what I heard? No. At least I don't think. I don't think it got hotter in here. I didn't tighten the jam nuts. Believe it or not, tightening the jam nuts can have an effect on the overall adjustment. And I did that on purpose. So take it out again. How does it feel? Is it snapping in?
That side, where it'll be 180.
Try it 180. About the same? Yeah. Okay. What if you don't know that you were adjusted even remotely close when you started? Like you just bought the tractor at auction, you don't know who worked on it before. What's the way to start? Where do you start so you know you're getting close? Lock it in, just like it is here. Run all the adjustments in till they're finger tight, or maybe with a wrench, so that there's the same amount of torque on both of them. So you've taken up all the slop on both of them. Turn it, maybe 180, maybe do it every 90 degrees and see if there's any variation before you lock it down. And then you see how it feels after it's locked. So I'm gonna lock the jam nuts. Not right now. Just give me a minute. Okay, see if that changed it. Does it feel any different? Looser or tighter? Slightly tighter? Right now. It's just snapping over. Okay. So that is, in a nutshell, the adjustment procedure. I had a couple cautions I wanted to mention to you, and I got to pull my notes out to make sure I don't forget anything. These old tractors, most of them have a pulley brake, and on this tractor, the pulley's on the other side. Is there a brake on this one? So most of these have a pulley brake that can or cannot also stop the transmission from spinning. The reason I mention that, some of these old tractors, even if everything's adjusted properly, there's a brake so that when you've got inertia in the gears, in the drivetrain, or in the belt pulley spinning, you have a way to stop it. John Deere's. All the John Deere's have a pulley brake on it, right? Same thing. You have to be careful. Some of these old tractors, if you engage the clutch when the transmission is in neutral, even if everything's working properly and everything's adjusted properly, when you disengage it, there's enough drag that the transmission gears won't stop spinning, and there's no way to put it in gear besides shutting the engine off. And there's been a lot of transmissions that have had teeth knocked off of them because somebody wasn't aware of that, and they disengage the clutch, and they wait, and they think everything's okay, and they go to put it in gear, and they knock clang teeth. So that's one of the watch-outs when it comes to clutches on these old tractors, is you have to make sure that you know there's a pulley brake, you know that it's working, and you know that the gears have stopped turning before you go to shift it into gear. Appreciate the time. I'd like to give a thanks to Kurt and the whole Aumann team for having us all here today. This is kind of a collector's social who's who in the hobby, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everybody for coming.
English-built tractor, and he's from North Dakota, and so I would imagine that tractor was probably exported to Canada, and he was able to find it up there. So it's kind of a famous field marshal. Was kind of the John Deere of England for a while, and it's so unique. He started with a shotgun shell. I've had a lot of tractors I'd like to shoot, but that was kind of unique because you started with a shotgun shell.
So to start this, you move this lever up here, and that disengages the transmission, so it puts less strain on when you start it. But we're going to start it with a 12-gauge shotgun shell. This is a used shell. It's a solid powder shell that burns quite slowly. So to start it, we have to prime it. And I'm going to prime the fuel or the oil pump to give it oil prime before we start it. And then I'm going to turn it over by hand to inject fuel in it prior to starting it, so it's all primed. there's a mark right here for start, and that's top dead center. So this is a box of original starting shells. That's a brand new shell. Shell goes in here. This is a firing pin, and you hit that with the hammer to start it. So this is the glow plug. It's a special piece of paper. So this is a glow plug. We're going to light it on fire.